If you've ever tried to dig into what the Bible says about the afterlife, you've probably hit this wall of kind of confusing terms. Sheol, Hades, Gehenna, the lake of fire. Are these all just different ways of saying hell? Well, not exactly. In this explainer, we're going to map out the soul's entire journey, showing how it actually moves from a temporary state to an eternal one. So, yeah, what is the difference? The key to understanding all of this is that these aren't synonyms. Nope. They're actually distinct stages in a timeline. It all moves from a temporary holding place to a final permanent destination. So, let's trace that path together. All right, so what happens right after death? It might surprise you to learn it's not some immediate final judgment. The very first stop is actually a temporary realm, almost like a waiting area for all departed souls. Back in the Old Testament, this place was called Sheol. Now, you gotta think of it as a general destination for everyone who died. It didn't matter if they were righteous or not. It wasn't necessarily a place of punishment, but simply the place of the dead. A realm of departed spirits just waiting. Now, fast forward to the New Testament. The language flips from Hebrew to Greek, but the core idea of this holding place, that stays exactly the same. And the Greek word for it is Hades. Okay, this is absolutely crucial. When the New Testament talks about Hades, it is not talking about the final eternal hell we often think of. It's just the New Testament's word for Sheol, that same temporary place for all souls waiting for the final judgment. But here's where it gets really interesting. Sheol, or Hades, isn't just one big uniform space. The texts actually describe it as being split into two very, very different sections. So on one side, you have a place of total comfort, sometimes called paradise or Abraham's bosom, and it's described as a state of peace and rest. But on the other side, there's a place of torment and agony. The best picture we get of this is that famous story of the rich man and Lazarus from the Gospel of Luke. It just paints this incredibly vivid picture of two completely opposite experiences, both happening within Hades. And that story emphasizes that a great gulf separates these two sections, making it this impassable chasm. It's a powerful image, right? It means once a soul is on one side of Hades, there is no crossing over to the other. That separation is fixed, at least until the final judgment. But this temporary state in Hades isn't the end of the line. Not at all. The entire biblical narrative points toward a future final judgment, and that's the event that moves souls from their temporary state to their permanent, eternal destination. Now, this is fascinating. When Jesus talks about the final place of punishment, he actually uses a word that comes from a real-world place. The Greek word is Gehenna, which comes from the Hebrew Gehinnom, the Valley of Hinnom. This was a real valley just outside Jerusalem, and in ancient times, it was this cursed place known for idolatry and even human sacrifice. So you can see why it became such a powerful symbol for judgment. So when Jesus uses the term Gehenna, he's grabbing that dark, real-world imagery to describe the place of final judgment that happens after death. This is the eternal hell, a permanent state of punishment totally separate from the temporary holding place of Hades. But the Bible's description of this final destination doesn't even stop there with Gehenna. The very last book of the New Testament, Revelation, gives us an even more specific and, frankly, terrifying image for this ultimate place of punishment. And that image is the lake of fire. This is described as the absolute final hell, the place of eternal punishment for all unrepentant rebels, both angelic and human. The scriptures are pretty clear here. After the final judgment, those from the torment side of Hades are sent to the lake of fire as their final, eternal destination. Okay, so let's just map out this whole chronological flow one more time. Step 1, a person dies. Step 2, their soul goes to the temporary realm of Sheol or Hades. Then, at some future point, comes step 3, the final judgment. And it's only after that judgment that some are sent to their final, eternal destination, which is step 4, Gehenna, also known as the lake of fire. The whole thing hinges on this. Sheol and Hades are temporary. The lake of fire is eternal. So, look, if you take just one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be that fundamental distinction. The entire framework hangs on the difference between a temporary waiting period and a final eternal state. So let's just nail it down. Sheol and Hades, that's the temporary waiting place for all souls before the final judgment. Gehenna and the lake of fire, That's the final and eternal place of punishment that comes after that judgment. You could say one is the waiting room, the other is the final verdict. And that kind of brings us to a final big question to chew on. How does understanding this whole journey, from a temporary waiting place to a permanent judgment, how does that shape our view of justice, mercy, and eternity? It's a pretty profound thought to consider. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown.